Hello, fifth graders, and welcome to your math lesson for today. For today, things are a little bit different. You're only going to need paper and a pencil. So make sure you go get some paper, pencil. Come on back, and we'll get started. So as I've been mentioning, our warm-up problems are already going to be preparing us for our end of quarter three quarterly exam that we're going to take. So these are the types of problems that we should be doing to get us ready for that. This is also going to build on to today's lesson and something we need to review for today's lesson. So we're expressing, that's not supposed to say 3/4, that's supposed to say 3/8. 4 and 3/8 correct to 2 decimal places. This should say express 4 and 3/8 as a decimal correct to 2 decimal places. So remember, if we're expressing something correct to 2 decimal places, that means we need to do our division out to the 3rd decimal place and then round. We had been working on this earlier, so it's going to be continuing with that same skill. So go ahead, pause, express this fraction, this mixed number, I should say, as a decimal correct to 2 decimal places, then come on back and see how you did. So remember, fifth graders, that when we're dealing with mixed numbers and we're turning fractions into decimals, that whole number just stays the same, right? We don't actually have to do anything with that. So now we express this fraction as a division problem. We want to make sure that if it's a proper fraction, our answer should be less than 1, right? If we do our division correctly. So if you're doing this division and it turns out to be something greater than 1, then that means that you did your division in the wrong order, okay? As long as that's a proper fraction. So now we kind of practice this with our previous lessons, that if we know we're going to 3 decimal places, then we can add our decimal point and 3 zeros. You might have noticed that we could find the exact answer to this, but remember, if you're being told to do it correct to 2 decimal places, then you're going to round, even if you found that the decimal terminated. Okay, so 8 does not go into 3, but it goes into 30 3 times. 3 times 8 is 24. We subtract and get a remainder of 6 and bring down our 0. 8 goes into 60 7 times. 7 times 8 is 56. Remember, 5, 6, 7, 8, with a remainder of 4. And we bring down our 0. 8 goes into 40 5 times with no remainder. But remember, it says correct to 2 decimal places, which means we need to round to this second decimal place. So everything to the left stays the same. We look to the right. It tells us to add one more, 5 or more, add one more. Everything to the right becomes a 0. But remember, with a fraction or with a decimal, we don't need to add those zeros because we want to erase those unnecessary zeros at the end. So the correct answer to this one would be 4 and 38 hundredths. How'd you do? Remember, fifth graders, these are checkpoints along the way. So if you had a tough time with that warm-up problem, or if you were confused about some step of it, then that's a good hint to come see me during office hours. Come see Mr. Tomhave, and we can kind of talk through some of these problems, okay? So for today, fifth graders, our objective is going to be dividing a decimal by a 2-digit whole number. Dividing a decimal by a 2-digit whole number. So we want to remember that we did this earlier, that when we're dividing, we want to use estimating in order to help us be prudent about our decimal point, right? And there's going to be some rules that we're going to follow in order to place our decimal point. But the estimate also is really going to help us make sure that we're placing it in the correct place. So that estimate is going to be useful, okay? Also remember the rule that we already discussed when we're doing division involving decimals, that our decimal point that's in the dividend needs to line up with that decimal. I guess I should say it the other way. The decimal that's in the quotient should line up with the decimal that's in the dividend. So as we're looking right to your answer and right below, you should see that those decimal points are lining up with one another, okay? And then also, just like we said, as we move in, we're going to have quite a few exact answers, and then we're also going to have quite a few where we have to round. And so when we're rounding, we want to remember that if you're rounding to the second decimal place, that means you need to do your division out to the third decimal place and round. This is the practice that we had done earlier, and we're going to continue doing that same practice, okay? So all of our practice problems are actually going to be ones that I'm going to write for us on a piece of paper. Same with actually your homework and your practice work are all going to be documents that I have created, okay? So with that in mind, you're going to get into today's lesson. So I'm going to flip you around, and we will get working. Okay, so for all of these problems that we're going to do today, we're going to first estimate and then find the exact answer, okay? We've done this before with our division, and again, since we're dealing with decimals, these estimates help us to make sure that they help us to be prudent and make sure that our answers make sense. Okay, so our first problem that we're going to do together, and remember, you should be working along with me. I'm going to have you do some on your own, but we want to start out by doing some together. So 59 and 28/100 divided by 19. It's been a while, so remember first we want to estimate. It's been a little bit since we've done this, but remember when we're doing division estimates, some of you guys are still like doing the division and then rounding your answer, and that's not what it means to estimate. When we're estimating with division, remember we want to round our divisor, make it simple. So round our divisor first, and then we want to round prudently here in order to get an exact answer. So as I'm doing my estimate first, I look at 19 and I think, what am I going to round this to make it easy for myself? We're going to round that to 20. 20 is our easy rounding. Now we look at these first two numbers and think, what do I round those to so that they divide evenly by 20? We're going to round it to 60. 60 divided by 20 is 3. So that tells us our answer to the exact problem. And remember, this is our estimate. That tells us our answer to this exact problem is going to be about 3. And it's going to help us as we're placing our decimal point. So now we're going to go ahead and copy our problem and find the exact answer. So remember the rule that I just reminded you, that this decimal point in our dividend needs to be in the same place as that decimal in our quotient, in our answer there. And we want to make sure that we're being careful and neat with our work because there's a lot of places where things could go astray, okay? So we know that our answer is about 3. So as we're looking, we're going to say 19 does not go into 5. But it goes into 59. We're going to say 3 times. I think that's going to work. After this problem, I need to switch to a pencil because remember the last time we discussed how it was imprudent of me not to be doing division with a pencil. Okay, so now we're going to do our multiplication, and we start with those ones places. So 3 times 9 is 27. So we write our 7. We got to keep track of our 2. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 2 is 57 with a remainder of 2. Good, so our remainder is less than our divisor, so that means we did a good estimate there. And now we bring down our 2. Remembering, of course, that decimal point needs to be right above where it is in the dividend. Now 19 goes into 22 one time. 1 times 19 is 19 with a remainder of 3. And we bring down our 8. And now we ask, how many times does 19 go into 38? We already tried 3. Remember, 3 times 19 is 57. So that's way too big. So let's try 2. 2 seems to be prudent. So 2 times 9 is 8. Sorry, 2 times 9 is 18. We write that 8, and we remember, keep track of that 1. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. And our remainder is 0. So our exact answer is 3 12/100. And remember, we want to compare to our estimate. And yeah, that looks like it was pretty accurate there. We did pretty well with that estimate. Okay, so let's try another one. Number 2, I'm switching to pencil for prudence sake. So our second one that you guys are gonna copy down is 5 22/100 divided by 29. Okay. Okay, so we're going to do our estimate here. We're starting with that estimate. So remember, we want to round our divisor first and keep it simple. So 29, we want to round to 30. And now we look here and figure out what are we going to round to that's divisible by 30. So this might be a little tricky because you look at that and think 5 isn't really close to anything that's divisible by 30. The closest thing is 30. And 5 and 30 are pretty far apart. So we're actually going to round this to 0. Okay? So now we estimate 0 divided by 30, 0 divided by any number is going to be 0. So our estimate is 0. Our answer is going to be close to 0. Okay? And arguably maybe even less than 1. Okay? But we'll have to see. But that gives us a gauge. So now remember, we want to copy that problem. We want to copy it carefully. Give ourselves space. And then remember that decimal point has to line up. That is our rule for division. Line up those decimal points and do so carefully. Okay. 29 goes into 5 how many times? 0. And so usually we do an X, but remember when we have a decimal point, we want to actually put that 0 there in order to show that it's 0 point something. It's always our best work to show 0 point something. Okay, 29 goes into 52 how many times? I'm actually going to think about my estimate, 30. So 30 times 2 is 60. So that seems too high. 2 seems to be too high. So I'm going to try 1. 1 times 29 is 29. And then we have to subtract. We can't subtract, so we're going to turn this 2 into a 12, this 5 into a 4. 12 minus 9 is 3. 4 minus 2 is 2. And we want to be in the habit of checking. Yeah, 23 is less than 29. So that was good. That was a good number for us to use. But if we ever find out that our remainder is greater than our divisor, then of course we have to go back and change what we put in our quotient. But now we bring down that 2. Okay, so I'm going to again be thinking about this estimate of 30, which I kind of think of like 3, right? 30. So I see this 23, and maybe it's 24, but that seems a little high, right? If I did 30 times 8 to get 240. So I'm going to try 7 instead. 7 times 9 is 63, so we write our 3 and hang on to our 6. Then we do 7 times 2 is 14, plus 6 is 20. All right, we're going to have to see with our subtraction if I did a good estimate or not. So 2 minus 3, we're going to have to turn into 12. 12 minus 3 is 9. 2 minus 0 is 2. Uh-oh, what do we notice? Thank goodness I wrote in pencil. So now we have to change, right? If our remainder is the same as our divisor or greater than our divisor, that means we have to change. So I'm going to change this to 8, and I know if 29 is the remainder, then if I move it up to 8, we're going to get an exact answer. So our exact answer here will be 232 with no remainder. And so we compare. Do these seem prudently close? And I say, yeah, that seems pretty good. All right, 5th graders, let's keep trying. Keep practicing. So we're doing a 3rd practice together. And again, you should keep working with me, even though I'm really giving you the answers as we go. The best practice that you can be doing is to be working along with me as we go. So 18 divided by 16. So remember, our first step is going to be an estimate. And looking at these two numbers, you could probably leave this divisor by itself and then think, what is close to 18 that's divisible by 16? So our estimate in this case is actually going to be 16 divided by 16, or 1. So that means our answer should be about 1. And now we want to copy the problem to do our division. Okay. Okay, so how many times does 16 go into 1? It doesn't, but it goes into 18 one time, with a remainder of 2. And at this point, 5th graders, we should be really comfortable with adding a decimal point and a 0 to keep doing our division. Now remember the rule. Once we add a decimal point in our dividend, we need to add a decimal point in our quotient here. They should line up nice and neat. And I'm really working hard to do my most temperate and careful work in order to have things be really neat. Now I bring down a 0. How many times does 16 go into 20? Just once again. 1 times 16 is 16 with a remainder of 4. Okay, so what do? We have to add a 0 and bring it down. Okay, and so now you might be thinking, what's happening? We just keep going. As long as the directions tell you to find an exact answer, we just do need to keep going. Okay, so how many times is 16 going to go into 40? Prudently, I think we'd say 2 times. Okay, 2 times 6 is 12. We hang on to that remainder, write our 2, and then we have the 1. Now 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. That seemed pretty good. We subtract and get an 8. We have to add a 0 and bring it down. Okay, so this one, we kind of are thinking like, what if this was about 15? It would probably go in like 5 times. If it was about 20, it would go in 4 times. But this seems closer to 15, so let's try 5 times. So 5 times 6 is 30, so we write our 0 and hang on to our 3. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 3 is 8. Oh, whew, we did it. So now we compare. This is our exact answer. This is our estimate. Those seem pretty great. I think our estimate and our exact answer are pretty close. Okay, we're going to keep going, 5th graders. We're going to keep doing practice. I know we're just doing a lot of practice today, but it's what's going to help us when it comes time to doing your homework. All right, so we are on number 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to do 448 thousandths divided by 56. So this is another one where the estimate gets tricky, but I think just looking at our numbers, we have 0 point something and then a number that's close to 60. So what are we going to round to? I mean, I think anytime we're looking at 0 point something divided by this great number, we're looking at really 0 divided by that number. And 0 divided by anything is 0. So again, our answer is going to be close to 0 at this point. And now we want to make sure to copy this problem, do so nice and neatly. And remember to align those decimal points. That's kind of always going to be our first step as we're looking at our division, okay? So now we want to go carefully through. How many times does 56 go into 0? And the answer is it doesn't. It goes in 0 times. And since that's right by our decimal point, okay, we're going to write a 0 there. Now we look, how many times does it go into 4? 0 times again. 44? Still 0 times. Okay, so now we get to our 8. 448, I should say. So 56. I'm kind of thinking of it as being close to 60. So, you know, then we can kind of focus on the 6 and the 44. It's kind of close. So we're going to say maybe like 50. Like, I don't know, 8 times maybe. We'll start there and see. 8 times. So 8 times 6 is 48. So we write our 8 and hang on to our 4. 8 times 5 is 40. Plus 4 is 44. Oh boy, we lucked out. No remainder, okay? So we check our answer. Does this seem close to 0? And I say, yeah, it really does. That estimate seems to match our exact answer pretty well. Okay, we're going to do a couple more together, and then I ask you to do a couple on your own. I know that this is a little bit of a trickier concept, so I want to keep working together for a while before we try on our own. Okay, so we're going to do 2 76/100 divided by 23. Okay. So again, I'm kind of looking like 23 is so much greater than 2. So when we're thinking of an estimate again, I think we're looking at 0 divided by 23 is 0. So our estimate is telling us that our answer is going to be pretty close to 0. Okay. So now we carefully copy the problem, making sure to line up our decimal points. And now we just go a step at a time. 23 does not go into 2. It does go into 27 once though. 1 times 23, we subtract with a remainder of 4 and bring down our 6. How many times does 23 go into 46? 2 times. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 2 is 4 with no remainder. And so we compare our answers to our estimates. Does that seem to be pretty close? I agree. I think we did pretty well. All right, let's try number 6, and then I'm going to give you 2 opportunities. I'm going to have you actually pause on this one. So our problem here is 62 62/100 divided by 31. So remember, when you pause, you're first going to do an estimate, and then you're going to find the exact answer. So go ahead, give it a try. Come on back and see how you did. So when we're estimating, I would round this 31 to a 30. And now we want to look at these 2 numbers, digits I should say, and what can we round them to so that they're evenly divisible by 30? We should have said 60. So 60 divided by 30 is 2. There's our estimate, and it gives us an idea of where our answer might turn out to be. So now we carefully copy our problem, and we make sure to line up our decimal points. Okay, 31 does not go into 6. It goes into 62 how many times? And we should have found it goes in twice. 2 times 31 is 62. 0, and we bring down our 6. So now remember, we need to make sure we're keeping, there should be something above each of our digits in our dividend here. So how many times does 31 go into 6? 0 times. 0 times 31 is 0, and we get a remainder of 6, and then bring down our 2. We should already see this. We've already done this part of it. So 31 goes into 62 twice with no remainder, and we compare our estimates to our answers, and they seem pretty good. Okay, I'm going to give you one more chance to try one on your own before we switch gears a little bit. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to have you do 15 66/100 divided by 29. So remember, you're going to estimate and find the exact answer. So pause, give it a try. Come on back and see how you did. Okay, so as you're estimating and you're thinking about rounding this to 30, you could have gone 2 ways. You could have said, well, I'm going to round this to 0 and get an estimate of 0. That would have worked. Or maybe you actually found that 15 is half of 30. Maybe you noticed that 15 is half of 30. So maybe your estimate was around a half. Either one of those would have been great, strong estimates, okay, 0 or even a half. So now remember, we copy this problem. I'm going to scooch you over so I don't bump into my upside down other one. So hopefully we used our best writing to copy this problem and then remembered to line up our decimal points. Okay, so 29 does not go into 1. It's not right next to our decimal point, so we don't have to put a 0. But this next one, 15, is, so we should put a 0 there. So now we end up with 156. So 30 about into 156, my estimate I'd say is about 5. Also, our estimate up here might help that. So 5 times 9 is 45. So we write our 5 and hang on to our 4. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 4 more is 14. And we subtract, wait a second, Miss Burry, what are you doing with your silly subtraction? And we subtract 6 minus 5 is 1, 5 minus 4 is 1, so we get a remainder of 11, which is less than our divisor, so that's great. And we bring down our 6. How many times does 29 go into 116? So 4, maybe. 4, let's see. 4 times 9 is 36, and we hang on to that 3. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 3 is 11. Woo! And maybe you tried 3 and then you had to go again, but you should have gotten there. So you'll see, right, our estimates, both of these actually are pretty great with our exact answer. So 5th graders, at this point, you might have a good gauge. Like, I know this is difficult with our division, but again, if you're feeling like you're struggling, now would be a great time to come seek out some help during office hours, okay? We're going to switch gears slightly to needing to round our answers, okay? We're going to have to round. So we are going to estimate, but our exact answer, and I'm putting it in quotes because it's not going to be exact, will be round to the second decimal place, okay? Which is different than what we've been doing. We've had exact answers so far, okay? We're going to do 2 problems like this together. There's going to be some problems like that for your practice and homework as well, okay? So 48 and 6/10, still working along with me, divided by 21. So first thing we want to do is our estimate, okay? So I'm going to round 21 to 20. And then look, what can I round these first 2 digits to that's going to be divisible by 20? So we'd say 40. 40 divided by 20 is 2. So our answer is going to be about 2, probably greater than that, but about 2, okay? So now we copy the problem, we line up those decimal points, and we jump on in. So remember, if we're rounding to the second decimal place, we need to do our division out to the third. So I'm choosing to put my 2 zeros, so I have all the way out to the third decimal place before we even get going. Okay, 21 does not go into 4, but it goes into 48 twice. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 4 is 4, with a remainder of 6. And we bring down our 6. How many times does 21 go into 66? 3 times. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6, with a remainder of 3. We bring down our 0. How many times does 21 go into 30? Just once, with a remainder of 9. We bring down our 0. How many times does 21 go into 90? 4 times. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. Remainder of 6. We're not done. We haven't found an exact answer, but remember, we're rounding to that second decimal place. So once you get to the third, you stop and round. Remember the rules of rounding. Everything to the left stays the same. Everything to the left of that box, that is. We look to the right. 4 or less, let it rest. Okay, so we're going to leave that 1 alone. Everything to the right becomes a 0, but when we're talking about decimals, we don't need to write those zeros, right? We take them off. So our answer here is going to be 2 31/100ths. And then we match with our earlier estimate, which seems correct. So on your homework, you're going to be asked to do this, and this is our same process we've been using. We're going to do one more together before I send you on your way. So let's do, sure, 104 and 8/10 divided by 42. So we start with our estimate. We're going to divide by 40. What is close to 104 that's evenly divisible by 40? You could go one of 2 ways. You could go to 80, you could go to 120. Either of those would work. 120 is slightly closer, but not by much. So we get an estimate of about maybe 2 or 3. Either one of those would have been acceptable, reasonable estimates. So now we copy down the problem. We line up our decimal points. And remember, if we're rounding to the second, it means we're going to have to divide to the third. So we can add those 2 zeros. So 42 does not go into 1, does not go into 10. How many times does it go into 104? We're going to say just the 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. And we subtract and get 20, which is good. 20 is less than 42. We want that to be true. And now we bring down our 8. How many times does 42 go into 208? I kind of see this 4 and this 20, and that makes me think 5. And maybe we'll be too high, but we're going to try it out. So 5 times 2 is 10. Ooh, bad estimate. 5 times 4 is 20 plus 1 is 210. So that's too high. So we actually are going to go back and drop it down to 4 so that we can actually get the appropriate remainder. Okay, now we say 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 4 is 16. And we subtract and get a remainder of 40. And we bring down our 0. 42 goes into 400 how many times? As I'm thinking about maybe 50s, right? I know for sure 8 50s. But I'm wondering if it's going to go even higher. So let's see. I'm going to just go wild and try a 9, even though I might regret it. 9 times 2 is 18. I hang on to that 1. 9 times 4 is 36. Plus 1 more is 37. Woo! I don't regret it for once. Okay, so now we do our subtraction. This becomes a 9 and a 3. 10 minus 8 is 2. 9 minus 7 is 2. We get that remainder of 22. All right, we're bringing down our 0. 42 goes into 220. I'm going to say 5 times. We tried it before. Let's see how we do. 5 times 2 is 10. We've got that 1. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 1 is 21. Ooh, we're in good shape. Now remember, we still have a remainder, but we're going correct to that second decimal place, so we're going to round at this point. And this one is a little bit of fun for us, a little bit of tricky fun. So we look to the right, right? It's a 5, which tells us to add 1 more, which means if we're adding 1 more to 9, that's going to become a 10. So we can kind of think of it like this. If we think about this as like a 49 and we add 1 more, it's going to become a 50, right? And everything to the left. So we end up with 2 and 50 hundredths, or 2 and 5 tenths. And then compare to our estimate of either 2 or 3, and that seems reasonable. All right, 5th graders. A lot of division, which I know is tricky. So you've got some practice work, which is going to walk you through the same steps. You're going to have a bunch that are exact answers, okay, where you find your estimate and then you find the exact answer. You also are going to have some that require you to round as well, okay? So do that work carefully. Take your time. Remember that when you're writing, you want to write things nice and neatly to keep them organized. And do your best with that work. And remember, as always, I'm going to be checking this work, right? This is an exercise that's about division, so I need to see your division as you're submitting pictures of your work, okay? If you have questions or need help, of course, come see us. Remember your checkpoints along the way. We're here to help, and good luck.